Alrighty. Hi, I'm Robert. This is Michael, and we're basically going to be going through this week's progress for pandemic, programming, level design, balance, you name it. We're going to be pretty much hitting upon every aspect of development this week. So, right off the bat, Michael has pretty much been the one at the helm working on the game's balance and trying to iron out the kinks, checking Steam, Discord, and just talking to people, watching countless hours on Discord, just asking people to play the game and just seeing how things feel. Do you want to kind of talk about that, Michael?
Yeah, so actually, I went ahead, put a little picture in my channel that you can pull up. That way, I can just explain and go over that while you get the actual map pulled up for the system over.
I have it up.
Okay, so that picture I put in my channel.
Let me pull that up.
So basically, what I've been working on is something to kind of benefit, like let's say it's called the kill zone, and well, kill cone is a better way to put it. And what that is as soon as he gets that image up, I'll be able to kind of show you
It's
how the
up.
range system works. So my don't ignore my lines. I can't draw straight lines. So the first green line on the left, that is where let's say your starting circuit. And the green line in front of them would be the kill cone circle. So anything that enters that range takes amplified damage. So let's say you're down to the last five guys. It's kind of a reward system to kind of push and kind of reward aggressive gameplay and kind of give you an opportunity to fight back, especially for a little bit more of the tankier units, because there's not really a way to program in like setting like certain amounts of spread based off range. That's a little complicated. So this would be a way to where it kind of allows you to get that extra damage push in the initial. So like when you first start the game and you're getting hit by some of like the brutes or like you get hit by a horde, it kind of gives you a chance to kind of risk it or run away. So you can either face tank it and it could go in your favor, or it could go the opposite way. It's really just to give you an extra chance and also make it a lot more feasible to. It just makes the guns feel more impactful at that range versus like the stormtrooper stuff that happens as it starts to expand upon that. And so, with that being said, I went ahead and changed a lot of the values for a lot of the weapons. So put it this way, every single section in that picture is 1,000 UU, and that would be like the dedicated range. Robert, I don't know if you have the ability to draw on that, so I could like while I read off like the ranges for so basically after the last screen line, that would be 1,000 UU, and the second, 2,000,
Yeah.
etc. So 1,000, 2,000, etc. And then I'll go over the changed ranges for the CERC weapon. And
Like
then I'll go
this?
over the spitter changes. Uh, over one. Over
Oh,
one. Yeah, because in between cones under 1,000.
okay.
Yeah.
I get the idea.
All right. So what I did with the change ranges. So shotguns are going to be right at 2,500 UU. So where Robert has that pulled up between the 2 and the 3, shotguns are going to be that's going to be their max range of engagement. So what's going to happen with that is anything within that kill cone that I was mentioning, they're going to do amplified damage. So it does make shotguns really devastating up close, like extremely devastating up close compared to like an assault rifle. And then with that, the pistols are at 3,500. So that's going to be between the 3 and the 4. And LMG, or actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. SMGs are at 4,500. So it's going to be between the 4 and the 5. And then LMGs are going to be at 6,000, which is right where Robert just put that 6. And then assault rifles are going to be at 7. And snipers are going to be at 9. So this one's a little bit of an odd number. It's going to be at 9,250. The reason why I went with 9,250 is because I don't want to push it too far, but I feel like that was a good enough range to make it feel like they have more range than the AR. It was a good middle point between the 7,000 and the 9,000, just to give them that extra bump over the assault rifles. And with that also being said, the spitters are going to be sitting right about at 7,000 is where the spitters are going to be with their range with ground units. The air units are going to, I think that's still sitting at the 1,200, 12, yeah, the 12,000. So that's going to be above the 10 range, so that it will be able to combat the aerial units. And the aerial ranges are right now the same, but we also, with that, made it to where the spitters have a 15% chance of missing their target when they hit. And that was one of the biggest things that I feel like we needed in terms of like the balance, in terms of the difficulty, is like when you were getting hit by the spitters, every time they hit you, you get a stack of the dot damage from the acid. And there, to my knowledge, I don't think there's a cap to
It
how much can
resets.
stack.
It
It just
resets, yeah.
resets. Okay, if it just resets, then that should be that honestly will make it a lot better because when you're getting hit by like 30 of them and there's no chance of them missing, it does make it feel like you get one shot by spitters. And so this should give you that, I guess, like a little bit more lenience to that amount of when there's 30 spitters at you, you know, out of the 30, you might only get hit by 11 versus getting hit by 30 at once. So that was a really big balance change we did. And going forward, just kind of seeing how that goes, we're going to dive into like the amount of infected that come out per wave, per investigation. We're going to be nailing upon that. And then with the little buddies, we also made it to where there's a cooldown, or not little buddy, the builder unit. We also made it to where there's a cooldown where they don't immediately just go start building another gas tower after you destroy the blueprint that they're building. So there's a cooldown on that, so they won't be as spammy. And with that being said, like going forward from today's playtest, the real big thing I want to take away is I just want to hear how you guys feel about the pacing for things, because with these changes, it might change that outcome of how people are feeling right now. So I want to kind of see how it feels after these changes before we start going into the nitty gritty. So that's really my spiel. I'll hand it back over to Robert.
So
And like I said, if you guys have any questions on balance or any suggestions, always make a thread. I listen to everything. I won't always make the change instantly. I need to take it in, think about it, and see how it will actually affect the gameplay in the long run.
we don't want to make it too hard. We don't want to make it too easy. We want to find a moderate balance in the middle. And one of the biggest things to underscore that is we need to get to the custom game options in the next couple of days. And this week has been, I guess you can say, filled with bug fixes and all the other stuff, and we'll get into that. But it's just basically carving our way to that. And then when we get to the custom game options, because right now you're ultimately playing something between directors kind of recruit, and it can be a little bit punishing for people, is what we've noticed. We've been reading Steam, we've been reading Discord, we've been seeing what people have been saying, and we're conscious about retroactively nerfing it too hard until we get to custom game options in the next couple of days, ideally around Tuesday, because then we can take that baseline and then you can change multipliers to make the guns, or not most of the guns, but the infected have more health, they move slower, damage multipliers, how many come, how many juggernauts are on certain days. You can literally make the game as hard or as easy as you want it to be by a day basis. So we're taking the base instruction set of how Legacy works with this custom game options that we're going to be doing next week and putting it on drugs. So it's going to be a lot more in depth than what we had previously. So this is a perfect example of basically just what we've been working on to just kind of cement the balance, and Michael's been kind of just leading that effort. So again, Steam, Discord. I know he prefers Discord. Is tag him if he misses it. Tag him. If you know what I mean. If it's been a couple of days or whatever, and you haven't gotten a response back, he'll at least give you an acknowledgement. He's not going to immediately confirm or deny in some cases, unless it's completely blatantly weird or broken. But he's at least going to take it into his consideration on how to tackle some of these things. Because you figure like let's say I learned this map really briefly, and I turn this corner. You can kind of see what he's been doing here. It's just kind of just running the gauntlet and just basically spawning in infected via console commands. And then basically seeing just how does the damage feel as they charge you, as they're at different ranges, how far can you see? Because like you figure the helicopters can see 6 times, like 2 times this. This is like what, 10K I think it was. So like you figure they can see roughly around here, so the quarter, sorry. They can see somewhere around here, and that's why he was saying a big thing for this week was adding in that air range versus ground range, and we need to do the same thing for the spine thrower. So we're going to be working out a change in the back end to make the spine throwers better facilitate having ground versus air range, because we've been talking to people on Discord, hearing their frustration and seeing how they can seem kind of bullshitty when it comes to the ranges of those. Because we don't want to make it to where like they just ignore helicopters. That's just going to be horrible. Because helicopters as they stand right now, if you know how to micro them and you know how to play the game, you can devastate them. That's why we had to increase the price of the Apache to 120K. Because people were rushing to the Apache, dropping 40K into it, and then boom, planet destroyer. Unless you like, if you weren't paying attention, spitters could overwhelm you. But it's just one of those things where we're just kind of looking at everything right now. So what I want to get into next is some goodies that Efren's been working on. And let's see if I can remember the way. Okay, there we go. So we're going to load up this map. We're going to turn off the navigation. And we're going to talk about the level design. Because I know that people want more levels. And they want more content. Because like I was talking to Quively and a couple of other people on the Discord recently. And even they were saying like HMB is great. But we need to have other content. We need to have other maps. Like you guys have your programmers working on the pandemic and the bug fixes and the gameplay, but the level designers need to be doing something in terms of like, you know, even just bringing the old maps back. So right now, Treasure Island, or what we're going to be calling it, the Bay Area map, it has been in renovation for the people that weren't here for the last 2 weeks. And as it stands right now, based off of what I'm going to show you in a couple of seconds, the biggest thing we're going to be pushing for is to get you guys to have Treasure Island by next Wednesday is what we're aiming for. From because like you figure now the system for Pandemic is set up now where it's plug and play, so it's very easy for the level designers with no real programmer intervention to just look at the HMB Half Moon Bay Pandemic map, recreate that in Calypso, recreate that in Treasure Island, you know, and be able to port those other two maps over. So then that way, going into next month, you know, you guys can theoretically have those two other maps. Because like, as it stands right now, we're talking about Wednesday or maybe Thursday to get you guys Treasure Island. And then slowly but surely that map will get Angel and San Francisco North as we add in the water combat again and get the LHA-6 and this Leviathan and all that in. So it'll be a layered rollout for that. But what we're going to do to basically just give you guys something actionable to play, a little more diversity in gameplay once this loads, is to get you Treasure Island and then do Calypso. And then Calypso, from what I was talking to Efren, will take probably about 3 to 4 days to port over. So those will be 2 new maps that you guys will have to play in Pandemic. And then after he ports those over, so we're talking like the first week of next month, because he figure this area right here, once it finishes loading the shaders, sorry, it has to prepare shaders, so it takes a hot minute. So basically, like, he's working on this to get this ready and playable for you guys by Wednesday. And it's just going to be this top region here to right here, this area. And then as we add in the other mechanics and systems, then we'll unlock Angel. And then again later, a month or 2 months later, going into December, we'll unlock the mainland. So that's generally the direction we're going into. So this will be one map that'll be coming in the next week or so. You guys will be able to play. And then the other one's Calypso. If you guys don't remember that from Legacy, it was basically a big city in the center. Actually, I can load it up and show you. But I'll load up the other one in a second. So this will be that one. And then let me go and find Calypso. So that would be you. And that would be Calypso Master. I'll just load right into that one. And those are the 2 that Efren's going to be working on before he goes to San Francisco North, because San Francisco North is a 2-month engagement easy. So we want to try and get those 3 maps in Pandemic, playing co-op to you guys. HMB, Treasure Island, the center area, and then Calypso. Then at that point, he can go. And Angel Island is functionally done. There's nothing that needs to be changed. So then all we're waiting for is the programmers to get caught up for the other gameplay mechanics and all the other systems, and then we can unlock the other regions, basically. So you'll notice that when you load into Treasure Island, the carrier will be nudged a little bit closer to Treasure Island, and then you'll just have a border where you can't leave the outside. You can't leave this main island you see here. And then over supplement weeks, as other mechanics come in, we'll unlock it. So this is Calypso. And this was the other island that we had in Legacy that basically is already functionally done. It just needs probably about 2 to 3 days of just gameplay scripting. It needs to just kind of go in, make sure all the navigation's working, make sure that everything's functioning, put in the helicopter nav. And those would be the 3 maps that you guys would have to play with the one that's already in there to basically buy us some time so he can go and work on San Francisco North, and essentially take his time to texture out the city and get it to the level of fidelity it needs to be. Now, you can easily go and look at this map in Legacy by loading it up. So I don't need to spend too much time on this, I would say, but it will give some unique situations in terms of, I'm sure most people are going to flee to the South Airfield, or they're going to flee to the North Airfield and set up their bases here, and then probably send their kill teams out into the city to probably try and reclaim it from Chelsea. But Chelsea might decide to take the airfield as their base and kick you out. So it'll just kind of depend in terms of how each game plays. There's a lot of verticality on this map, so it will give a different play style and different challenges, I'm sure, that will present themselves in terms of stress testing the game and helping us find any other issues that might present themselves from other maps. Because everything's obviously just a slow rollout just to get everything back to what it was in Legacy. So those are the 3 maps that we have there, or rather 2. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to load into, let's go to top-down example. And I'm going to turn off the nav. And I'm going to spawn in. Oh, that's just because there's a blueprint referencing error. I'm going to grab this helicopter, and I'm going to show some of the other stuff we've been working on. So recently, from a programming standpoint, we've been working to kind of bug fix and clean up the helicopters, but also get some more quality of life in. So one of the things that me and Derek were looking at was something like this, where we have a validator where you can land, so you don't have to sit there and guess, is my helicopter going to hit that street light? Is it going to run into something? So if I go here and I click it, then he'll move there, get to the position, and then land for you. So you don't have to sit there and be like, oh, the street light, is it going to hit it? The helipad? Nobody wants to deal with that shit. So the only thing I would say is that if you hold the key, it will go down in place. So if I hold it, it's not working. Oh, double tap. I'm sorry. So yeah, sorry, it's double tap. I lied. So if you double tap the key, it will land in place. So you still get both functionalities of that, basically. Let's see here. You can see that we've been working on bugs. A lot of fucking bugs. This has been Bugamajaro week in terms of basically fixing this little details panel at the bottom right, fixing crashes, stability, weird things that units shouldn't be doing, issues with the operator, I mean, you name it. So with the features and the mechanics that we're going to be showing off, you figure, a lot of it was just knocking out and talking to people on Discord, addressing the balance, adding in some more expansions of some systems and tweaking things. A lot of tweaking and playtests. So that's what kind of sums it up for this. And the same thing for here. If I take off a little bird, and then I hit C, you'll get a little icon. Now, what I'm curious of, and we're going to be doing a playtest after this, with anyone that wants to come and play on the Discord. So I'm going to release this for anyone to playtest, and then get their feedback live in the voice channel. And then also you'll have some time to marinate on it going into Monday. Because Monday, when we start up again, I want to know what people think about it, get some feedback about it, because I think that it might need to go a little bit further by operating kind of like how the build tool does, where you have 2 modes, one to place and another to rotate. I feel like this is a good starting point, but I don't know if I like it particularly. It gets the idea across, but I can't click here and then just rotate it. Like it's just gonna reject it there, And I just got a visual bug because now it's stuck there forever. So yeah, there's gonna be bugs for that. We got just report it as you run into them, and we will address it. But that's a good example of something that if you guys want to save that for the Q&A or just give me your feedback there, because you figure like I just don't think this is enough. I think that we need to have it just like the wall builder, where it's just like you click the place and then you click the rotate. So let me know what you guys think about that, and we'll go from there later on. The next thing was the radio music. So I spent a couple of days this week prototyping out the radio music and setting up how that works, and setting up a deterministic system for being able to index tracks. So if I load that up right here, let me stop and play it so it's the visual clutter is gone. You're going to notice right off the bat, I also put up a video tutorial on the last Steam post for people that do want to play music, is that I have a couple of sample tracks from Durvar, and then I have the royalty-free one from Raya the Valkyrie. So the idea would be is that every song, it takes the metadata, the first 64 kilobytes of the track, and then it gets the name and the link, and it uses that to generate a deterministic ID. So you can send MP3s, waves, FLACs to your friends, put them in any folder under the mods and radio music folder. Everyone can have a different folder structure. Everyone can have a different layout. It does not matter. The only thing that matters is they have the same physical track in one of those formats, and it's just everything else is in lockstep in terms you haven't modified it or tweaked it. Once you start to modify it or change a file, or if someone's an audio engineer and they export their own music and one person does one track, even though it's named the same, if you export it out, it'll have a different file stamp. You know how it is. So just keep that in mind when it comes to the music. Now, right now, everything's tied into console commands. We're going to be working on Monday to essentially add in the music player. So I'll show a quick example. So there's, a quick little sample track that Durvar whipped up to me to basically just demonstrate that it's working. And then I can use console commands to stop it. So it stops. It does work in co-op. So you figure if you have a lot of patience and you're a little more tech savvy, you could launch the game. Again, all these instructions are on the last Steam post in depth. We have a 2-minute video tutorial where I walk you through how to do this live if you want to follow on your own pace. But you essentially just need to get the ID right here. And then you essentially just type it in like the old Half-Life 2 mods, where you have to just do a little bit of CVARs here and there. So you can do that. You can paste in the Unreal Engine. So you don't have to type it out per se. You can copy it from CMD or copy it into a text file. And again, we're going to be working on that going into Monday. It's a very early preview. It was more of a technical test, I guess you could say, going into this weekend. So I can do it. Other people can do it to basically see how it works, see what kind of issues we run into, and then address it accordingly in terms of like memory leaks or any other things that might occur from just being able to play music and whatnot, memory management issues or whatever. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on that, doing a lot of benchmarks and performance tweaks just to make sure everything's above board. But as far as I know, all of my torture tests have resulted in no issues. And then you can see that on the post that I made, there's quite a few different console commands. Like, let me scroll up. You can set the volume. You can change the mode of how it plays. So if I go down to here and I change play to mode, and then I go to shuffle, I can change it to shuffle mode, and then I can play a track. Oh, I don't have it selected. I can play a track, put it in the shuffle mode, and the idea is that it will just randomly just pick random songs, or you can go sequential, which is basically it goes from 0 to 1, or 0 to 100, or whatever, however long your list is, and then loop, you already know what loop does. So you figure that's the basic idea of how that works. If you have a very small amount of mods, shuffle and like sequential it's random, so you might get the same track 2 or 3 times in a row. There's no like cross-checking going on where we're storing a memory buffer to increase the chance of, like, you have 5 songs, it might play track 2 times. because it's random. It might pick it again. So there's no like conditional there. So keep that in mind. If you have a very low amount of workshop mods, um, it will just work out of the box without you having to do anything. Now, the other thing I do want to mention is that there were quite a few tweaks put in terms of like, I guess you could say safeguards put into the game of like when you're destroying structures like these like basically these logs. So like if I go to my game install, I'll go to content browser. I'm gonna go to hold on, show and explorer, and I'm gonna go up. Hold on, I gotta find it for you real fast, so it's gonna be saved. Ah, here it is. So let me just pull this over. Okay, so another thing is for server admins, we did this activity log because we were getting a lot of reports and it was happening to us. Is that basically people were just being dicks towards the end of the game, in the middle of the game. They would delete your structure just to get money for themselves so they can go and buy something, get it killed, and then go and do it again. And then eventually when people would catch on, it would just be toxic. So we put this in here for accountability of the server host will know in terms of what happened, when it happened, and why it happened generally of like X, Y, and Z. So it'll print out the name, the timestamp, the location of the event, and what happened. And then based off of that, you'll be able to take decisive order of like, you're not playing with us anymore. We're putting it on control mode, X, Y, and Z. Because I know personally for myself, if you're going to come into a game and delete half the buildings, you're not playing with me ever again. I don't want to deal with it. People in the game don't want to deal with it. So you figure it's just one of those things where like if you lose that right, it is what it is. But we decided to put this in here and we're going to see how that goes. There have been some suggestions of having levels of rank, like an arma, where you'd have like a different like military CERC rank, so we could use that to basically say, oh, if you have this rank, you can destroy. And that way, basically, like when you first join a server, you don't have that rank by default, so you can't just come in, delete everyone's base, and leave if you're playing public. Because the biggest thing is I want to incentivize people to want to play public games. I want to incentivize people to meet new people. You know what I mean? Make friends. That's the fun about all this. I don't want to have everyone where they're just playing with their close knit groups because they're worried about someone coming in, deleting the entire base, and then running away. So these are all things that we're looking at just to kind of bring down the toxicity and make sure it doesn't become a problem. Because you figure I join random people's games, and I know people on Discord do it all the time, and then talk to them in text chat and then disappear. Because that's fun. So it's one of those things where that's something else we're looking into. Let me know what you guys think about that. Has that happened to you? What your experience has been playing the multiplayer in X, Y, and Z. So there's one aspect there that I've been really keen on to basically just lock down. Let me move on to the next section on my notes. So hold on. Okay. Oh, right. So I might as well cover that too. So as things are just kind of being like, tweaked back in, you can see that run mode's back. So I can just click and they'll just run by default. So I can just do that and then I can toggle it. Okay, they're going to walk. Okay, they're going to run. And just keep in mind when run mode is on, they can't shoot when they do it. So we're slowly but surely getting everything back to the way it played in Legacy and just kind of carving away at every little element to just, yeah. So there's that. That's back in. And then the next thing on my notes, hold on, which I'm going to demonstrate this so I don't have to load up a spitter and do it the other way, is that this is a video that I recorded earlier in the week that basically shows the spitter range. Michael has tweaked this since last time this video has been recorded. You can see an example of him missing, where he's basically like some of it, not all of his hits are missing, like they're going past on the lower. That's that accuracy percent we were talking about, where like they're not going to like hit your thing every single time. And then there's the dot that keeps getting occurred, the damage over time in the video. And those are just things that we're tweaking. One of the other things that I set out to do this week was to also eradicate issues like this, where like if you spam the minimap, you could get under the map. So we hardened the validation worked with people on Discord that were recording videos for us, recording pictures of where they were clicking, how they were doing it, when they were doing it, were they having a low frame rate, high frame rate, whatever. So this is a video I recorded to just basically demonstrate that the issue was fixed. And that was just something that we were working on going into this week to iron out. Now, last week, we briefly touched upon this, was that we were working on a better cohesion system for AI. And this is something that me and Derek have been just kind of really insistent on. This is another big chunk of this week, was improving their ability to understand when to destroy and when to basically move on. Because you figure our game has suffered for this for years since our release, is that the AI's threat analysis system was never very sophisticated in terms of how they deem threats, like proper threats per se. We think that we're finally at a point where it's like it's very solid, and now we need to put it out into the ether going into this weekend. The patch was secretly went out yesterday, but technically it's one of those things where like it's out. We need to play test it, see how it feels, see what kind of feedback we get from people, and then we'll address accordingly if it's too hard or too easy. Now in this picture, you can see an example where the attack wave gets spawned. The system flags the purple wall, and that purple wall is the minimum of what needs to be destroyed for them to accomplish their tasks, and then reach the center of the player's base in this example. So you figure what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up one of the other test maps. Let's see. So we'd be in I think it was this one. No, it's not that one. That was one of the other ones. Here it is. So we've been watching how people play the game, essentially, and essentially recreating their bases in our editor when we notice there's an issue, a bug, whatever. We ask that you take a picture of your base and you document where it is. If you notice an oddity in terms of basically how they're responding, their effectiveness of ability to attack, because they're a hive mind. They should be intelligent in terms of how they attack you when they decide to pull off and X, Y, and Z. So we'll continue to do this as we play test and refine, just to get the game to a point where we're happy with their ability to just decipher your base and tear it apart. So there was an issue, and we believe we resolved it. We'll see if it pops up your ugly head up again. Is that if you had two entrances like this locked in, and then you had an open one like this, they would run to the objective that got flagged here, get hit, or see someone over here, immediately add those units into their scene list, and they'd be like, whoa, wait, I gotta attack that guy. Oh, let me go around. It's shorter. It's not. Plot twist. Because you figure they were seeing this as like, oh, it's blocked. I can't reach that. So then they would go all the way around, and they'd be like, wait, but I was supposed to do something over there. And then they'd come back. And then they'd go over here. And then they'd come back. And they'd rinse and repeat that forever. So if you guys played for the last 2 weeks, if you guys played some of the early play tests, I would say about the last 2 weeks it's plagued the build. That was something that we seeked to rectify with the newer AI, just to make them a little bit more intelligent in terms of how they decide to like tackle tasks. So let me spawn them in. Hold on, I gotta figure out what the debug key was. I guess it was changed. Yeah, it's equal. Okay, yeah, I see. You know what? It's probably that navigation needs to be rebuilt because there were some recent changes that went through the build. So equal, we're gonna spawn it, and then we're gonna turn that on. Okay, so now they're gonna launch an attack. And we're gonna just kind of show you what they do differently now. Now in Legacy, and also in the other one, they would also dance like the Juggernaut. Other people would dance around the corners and kind of malfunction and do weird stuff or whatever. Now we are having an issue that we need to hunt down. Is sometimes like right now they are definitely failing to attack the structure reliably. That is something that we need to fix going into Monday and hunt down and figure out what's going on there. So you can see that they're going to destroy those two. And then they're going around again. Okay, so I guess that's malfunctioning now again. So something was changed recently. Yeah, so now they're going back around and they're going to flank. They shouldn't be doing that. That's awkward. So the most likely it was a ripple effect from another change somewhere else in the project. So we'll have to investigate that. Again, we're still kind of hunting down bugs and just kind of trying to figure out what's going on. In terms of like when they... Oh, what the hell? Get out of here. Let's see what they're going to do. Yeah, that's definitely... So there's still definitely some issues with the AI. I'm not happy with that at all. Because you figure they need to be more efficient in terms of how they choose when to attack stuff. Okay, save that. And then let me reopen the SDK. Let me log that crash. And then reopen the map. Okay, pull that over. Okay, load back in. Let's see if they do any better on the second run. Otherwise, I'm going to chalk it up to a bug report, and we're going to have to investigate it further. We'll do slow-mo 5 for sake of time. Yeah, they're still doing it. Delete you. Yeah, that's still not good enough. I don't like that. Because realistically, what they should be doing is basically they should be just destroying this wall, destroying that wall, and going through. And then if you see, the one thing that did also change is they do prioritize hurt walls more often than like, you know, fully health walls. So if I spawn in, they will prioritize walls that are wounded over walls that weren't hurt previously. That was another change that we did to their threat analysis system, where it will boost the threat of walls that are hurt and essentially try and mitigate going around. But clearly there is a use case here that is failing. Now what I'm curious as is I'm going to load up the other map and check something, because I am genuinely curious now. That's not it. That's the other. It would be... Ah. So here is the other test map we've been doing. And let me make sure everything's set up. Equals, okay. So let's see. Oh, you know what? This one doesn't actually have the preset entity set up yet. That was one of the other bases that we were staging based off of seeing how Krieg and a couple other people play. I think it's this one. Yeah, here we go. So I need to rebuild the nav. Save. Play in. And then equal sign. Let's see how this one runs this time. This one's running better than last time we showed you last week, or a couple weeks ago. Is that you figure, like, previously what they would do is they'd go over here and they would dance. Because they couldn't figure out, do they prioritize these turrets or those turrets or the guard towers that are hurting them. So they're doing some validation, I guess you can say, where they're going to ignore the back guard towers and only go for what they can. And they're not going to try and destroy the walls that aren't generating threat. They're going to try and go for the people that are hurting them, that are the greater threat to them, and then they'll worry about the non-combatants later on. So that was another change that we did to, like, just generally how they perceive enemies. So let me just fast forward. It's going to take up time. So you can see right now, they're going to beeline it to the guard towers, and they're not even going to attack the walls. And they'll attack them if they're in their way sometimes. And then you always get those ones that kind of malfunction and be like, maybe I want to destroy that. That adds some variance so they don't seem too robotic, so I'm not too chalked up about that. But you can see that in this test map, they're doing substantially better, but there's always room for improvement And one of the things that you'll notice is that, well, you can't see it, but if I F11 and go to one of them, and then I go to their squad manager, this is something that we've been prototyping, where the idea is that factions have squads that AI are organized under, and that the members in them basically dictate. Like you can see, these guys have died, so there's some null entries that need to be cleaned out and pruned. But these infected here are under that squad, and they're sharing information to basically improve the performance of the game. So the idea is that instead of doing like a massive amount of queries or checks that would basically say, can we attack this? What's the threat of this? Those squads try to stay together in hordes. So that would be an example of like something that, like, we'd use the squads to assign them to keep them together, so they're not all running in single file line going into the future. So these are all kind of like the incubator systems that we're just kind of fleshing out and ironing out over legacy, just to make them a little more intelligent. And then you can see now they have those objects still on their scene list because they saw them coming in, so they remembered that. So now they're going to come back and just kind of delete stuff if they weren't malfunctioning in terms of their melee distances. And that's something definitely we have to look into, because that's really, really frustrating. Let me just fast forward 5 for the sake of time. And you can see that they had that memory. So they decided to come back and just destroy all the Heskos. Now they're just going to eventually commit suicide, kill themselves, because the pandemic subsystem is saying, okay, we need to retask that infection. We need to retask that population to something else. So you figure this is a use case where it works. And the one previously is something that we're still working on, obviously, because like you figure it's acting not efficiently. I don't like it. So that's something that we're going to have to definitely tune up and tweak going into next week to improve the sophistication of their AI, make them more efficient, and make them understand how to attack, hyper optimize Fort Knox's bases that are well developed, that have layered defenses, so they understand how to tackle that. So we're going to move into the next point. Let me find that. Hold on. Let me check something on my list. Hold on. That would be... Yeah, okay. So that doesn't count. Okay, so we need to go to... Where is it? Right, the faction manager. So one of the other things that we sought to do was to add more limiters to the faction system as a whole. So if I can remember which map it was in, let me just search for it. It's not on my toolbar. Let me go to this one. Actually, you know what? For the sake of time, we're gonna just load into the build on Steam because it's already packaged. So it's already hyper optimized. So let me switch into the DevOps so I can just get the update I put out earlier. Let's see. Hold on. Let me pull this over. Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay, yeah, that's not gonna. I'll have to do it the old-fashioned way. Hold on. Okay, so we're gonna play in because that build failed. I'll have to check that. So we're gonna show navigation, and we're gonna slow-mo 5 for the sake of time, because what I want to show is the current pace of the infection spreading. And I know that's been a point of contention for the whack-a-mole-ish aspects of the game, and then we're going to get into the Q&A, and then we're going to start a podcast, because we're going to start a playtest. So in the next 2 to 4 minutes, we'll switch over to the Q&A, and then at that point, we're going to go into the next hour or so will be basically a playtest. So I can sit down with people, play the game with them, and have a good time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out. And essentially, what we essentially did was that if I zoom out while this is simulating, and I go to the faction manager, And I open that up. And I go to the data assets. That was attack config. Excuse me. So basically, we've been configuring and tweaking the wave by days a little bit more to make it a little bit more forgiving in the beginning of the game. You can see that max concurrent waves, max interval, and minimum interval, those do change based off of the day to make the amount of waves that can occur higher or lower based on the day and how often they can attack you. But these values haven't been tweaked. I've been tweaking them based off of talking to people. And then the other aspect is that this list right here is something that Michael still needs to work on going into this next week. Is essentially refining the investigations, because this is technically the data asset, or I guess you could say the way that when you attack with this kind of unit, they know to attack with that kind of unit. So building a Sharon is flagged as an air unit. You associate the weight, and then from there we use tiers of difficulty to basically send, like, oh, if it was an infantry unit, what do we send? If it was an air unit, what are the tiers of difficulty for countering that? And when we add birds and other stuff like that going into later, into like the next like month or so, then you'll get a little more nuance of not having to see like spitters all the time. What I'm going to do for the sake of audio is I'm going to mute that. And then I'm going to slow-mo 10. And let's see if I can find Chelsea. Let's see, where did she spread to? So we're going to search for her. Okay, so there's her hive. So she built over there. So you can see that right off the rip. I'm going to bring up a chart real fast, actually. So let me screenshot this. We added a lot more floodgates in terms of basically this how often she can spread. So this chart right here is a basic breakdown of how often she's allowed to build a new pod and how often based off of the day. And that counts for building one that she's lost, and that counts for new ones. So that way it gives people a little bit more breathing room in the beginning of the game by basically ramping her down substantially and then ramping her up as days proceed. So previously, day 3 was like 15 seconds, I think it was 15 seconds or so. So I doubled that, I've not tripled it a little bit there, to make it 42 seconds. And then day 4, so basically day 6 and day 7 is what day 3 and 4 used to be in the game in terms of difficulty. And we're going to just kind of see how that feels and adjust accordingly. Now, right now, I'm in a time dilation. So basically, I've multiplied the game time by a little bit to basically just kind of really quickly just show how the virus is spreading and how she hasn't really entered Falcon Field or Civic Center. It's substantially slower than what it was a couple of days ago. Now, once day 2 kicks around, she's going to expand either into Falcon or Civic. You can see she just exploded to the far right of Union Row. She also just did one in Falcon Field, and she put down a gas tower to solidify her location right here. She's going to try and lock that off in this area and take dominance over Falcon Field and Union Row. So by the early hours of day 2, she's starting to cement herself into the second zone. Now, if I don't build on the map, she won't build an attack party, and she won't try and basically kill me. So she's not going to really focus at all on basically attacking me. So this is the interesting part of the game, is that if you constantly attack her, if you constantly do harassment, she will not be able to prioritize, or I guess you could say have enough resources in some cases to build as if she was if you were turtling. So let's say, had I been constantly attacking her, pulling her resources, like if I was doing it or another player was going in Falcon Field and doing hit and runs, that would take away from her expansion efforts, whether it be in the zone or out of the zone, because she still has a global pool to pull from. She has a finite amount of people that she can build at any given time. So then that way, it's a tug of war in terms of basically, like, as you're fighting her, just like any other RTS game, where you can split her attention and slow down the expanse. So these are just tactics you can think about as you're playing because you figure like if I go over here and I hide, or if I go way over here and I hide, by the time she gets to me, she'll have the entire map under her dominion, to where my life is going to be a lot harder. So those are just things you want to think about as you're playing the game. And naturally, with introducing custom game options going into next week, it will give a little more nuance of like a little more forgiving, I guess you could say. If you want to turtle more, you can tweak it so you can turtle more. I'm just saying, is out of the base legacy spreading system, without any configuration, it will spread more violently if you're not at least trying to combat her in the wild and try and stop her from spreading, unopposed. So we're on the end of day 3, and she basically almost has half the map. Yeah, almost half the map. And then by day 4 and 5, if you haven't interceded, if you haven't fought her, then by day 3, she'll probably have a third, and then by day 4, she'll take the last zone, if depending on, because again, like there's no intervention right now, so she's just literally just rolling through that map basically. Um, so that kind of sums up the changes that I've made to kind of slow her down, and just we're gonna just see how that plays out over the next couple of days and adjust accordingly. Um, let's see if I can find the other thing. The Radio Man does have the ability to play music as well now. We did add in the radio tower, and Dimitri's working on some of the animations for that, because right now it just kind of like comes in and doesn't actually deploy. There were lots of collision and other tweaks to the level to add more areas for RTS players to be able to get around and explore. So if I turn on the navigation, you can see that like these areas were only accessible to operators before, and they shouldn't have been. So we tweaked through. I was looking at it earlier when I was like playing a co-op game with Phoenix and a couple other people last week, and I was like, wait, that's weird. Why can't my RTS units go up there? So when this asset was ported, there was some oddities going on. We also widened these staircases and other stuff like that because we want to make sure there's verticality. If an operator could get somewhere, an RTS unit should always be able to get there. There's no safe harbor. So you figure one of the biggest things is that the infected will chase you up here, and the infected can be hiding up here on these regions, because that green represents its equal opportunity for everyone. We've been going through and tuning up the collision for the street lights like this, other things that could grab operator bullets and would make the RTS aspects of movement kind of weird. So is it kind of been a lot of it an audit or just kind of double checking all of our assets? And you can just kind of see the purple fences are, I'll explain this now, are for the vehicles. So when we add the Ajax, you do different colors to represent what they can drive through. So basically we've already kind of marked some of them. Technically, we need to make a new color for this one, so that way the Bradley and the Strikers would know they can go through that, but the Ajax knows it can drive through that. Would be the general premise of what we're doing here. So right now you can see we unilaterally just kind of place it all as one color. But then when we get to like actually adding in the other vehicles, then we'll segment it further, and the Juggernaut will just be able to run through all the walls regardless. So you just keep that in mind, is that we're building that foundation now by basically just kind of like coloring it and segmenting it in that way. So the AI understand I can just Kool-Aid Man through this wall, or I can drive through that wall. And we just associate a navigation cost, so then that way they know it's a little bit more expensive, but they'll make the calculation in that moment to drive through it or go around it in that instance. So just one of those things that we're just kind of like ironing out and getting situated for when we introduce the Ajax, which as it stands right now, I am very keen on trying to eradicate and fix as many of the bugs as possible before we shift our efforts on the Ajax, because that's going to be a minimum of a 1 to 2 week engagement to get him in there. Like to get him in there, probably about 2 or 3 days, maybe. But to get him his pathfinding and his AI to where we're happy, easily a week or two. Working with the community to get it in there. So I'm trying to get it to the point where we can focus on that in its entirety. So radio music is in, custom games stuff is in. The bugs are nominal. There's always going to be bugs in any game. It's just a thing. But you figure getting the severe crazy bugs out, the replication desyncs, because we've been working with people on Discord and on Steam. Oh my god, there was this guy on Steam. He's a madman. This guy write reports like this, and I will love you forever. Whoever Bronze Wolf is, you're a legend. Like he just goes in and just plays the game and sends me reports, and I just fix them. I think we've been going back and forth just fixing bugs every day. Or he reports it, and then I try and fix it within 24 hours, and then he'll come back and let me know if it's broken or fixed or whatever. So we've been basically just kind of playing just the Steam tag to basically hunt down and fix these. So what he's doing right here, amazing. If you want to help out, like he has the version number, just copy and paste his format, and just fill it in. Basically, like that kind of stuff. That really helps me out for like hunting down bugs and fixing it, so we can move on to the other more funner aspects of gameplay. I'm definitely going to be probably copying his format and making people use it on Discord more often. Because sometimes they'll ask, like the idea is in your post, I shouldn't have to ask a question. Is that you figure like I read it, I get the pictures, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I get it now. Like it's this and that, and I can look at the notes, and I don't have to ask anyone any questions. I don't have to ask for a save file. It's just autonomous. So just keep in mind, like this is the perfect golden standard to just help us get through these bug reports as quickly and as efficiently as possible, so we can get to what matters most, which is basically the content. We have the initiative for getting the other two maps in. Great. But at the same time, we don't want to make the same mistake we made previously, where we give in to wanting to make everyone happy. We rush to that vehicle. We rush to the civilian evacuation. We rush to that mechanic because everyone wants it. But we don't give older systems enough time to breathe, to refine them, to bug fix them. And that came from an experience, but also just trying to basically make everyone happy. And we couldn't do it all in one moment. We're 2 programmers, 2 level designers, 1 animator, and character modeler. We're 5 people. Broken Arrow is like a couple hundred people. So you figure it's one of those things where it's like we need to kind of be able to put the brakes on and be like, no, we can't do that. Negatively review us, that's fine. But we're going to take the time we need to take to fix the fucking game. To get it to the point of completion that everyone wants it to be. Because I'm always arguing with people on Steam about this. About basically like, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. We're going to fix the game. We're going to iron it out. We're going to work with you guys in good faith to just figure out what needs to be done, what needs to happen. What are the concerns? And as long as you come to me with like, basically having a dialogue, I'm always for it. On Steam, on Discord. If you see me in a voice channel, come and talk to me. I don't give a shit. Like you figure if you want to play a game with me, we play games all the time on Discord and shoot the shit. We were just playing Space Engineers. There's a bunch of people on Discord. Just having a good old time. So just keep that in mind. I am super transparent. I am super approachable. Just don't be rude. Don't be out of pocket. Let's have a conversation. So just keep that's one thing that I just want to throw out there. So yeah, that kind of sums it out there. And I think that on the top of my head, I think that there's maybe about 4 to 5 bugs that are critical that need to be hunted down and fixed. Maybe there might be a couple others that just kind of spot up going into next week, but I'm playing it by card. So we're gonna put this build out today, and then it's gonna be you guys will play it, we'll play it, we'll write our bugs, you write your bugs, and then on Monday we'll reevaluate and be like, how does it feel? What else do we need to fix? And then if the stars align and everything feels good and everything's good to go, then we're good to go. And then we'll move on to basically just getting in the custom, getting in the radio. And then at that point, Derek will branch off and start setting up the incubators for the vehicles, and I'll assist and help where needed. And then I'm going to go work on the save system, because we desperately need a save system in the game, especially for bug testing, especially for just people like Hawkins can stop trying to murder me every time he builds a mega base. Him and Quively and Hawkins and and Krieg, and I'm sure all the other people on the Discord that like to build their sexy bases and they can't save shit. So, especially if the game crashes, I can feel the pain across the room when Krieg has spent 30 to 40 minutes playing like classical Beethoven over here, while everyone else is over here fighting a war. He's over here playing Bob the Builder in the compound. And we go back there and we retreat and we lick our wounds. But he's playing like City Skylines Builder mode, and we're over here waging a war. It's the funniest thing ever. The parallels there, like the differences in terms of like how each role can like take on a life of its own. Of like these guys are completely a different universe, and then like 3 cities blocks over, helicopters are flying out of the sky, people are yelling at each other, calling for reinforcements, and Krieg's over there with classical music with Hawkins, just having the time of their lives. Oh, you guys need some units? I'll drop in a VTOL in 5 minutes. Good luck. So it's fun. It's great. I love it. I love the dynamic, and I love the situations that are occurring based off of just everyone kind of coming together and playing and finding their roles and how you all kind of coalesce. So that's pretty much all I'm going to say in terms of the current state of the game. That's everything we've worked on. I'm not going to bore you going through the bug list. If you want to know what we fixed, go on Steam. I'll be posting another bug list report, I guess you can say, today or tomorrow. Probably like by midnight tonight. I'll post another bug listing, whatever, and basically we'll just go from there. So Q&A. Let's get into your questions. If you guys want to ask the question on voice, feel free. Michael's here with balance, the weapons, and basically just generally the modeling. So if you have a question for him, direct that towards him, and I'll answer any level designer questions or anything else to the best of my ability. Michael, did you want me to show the new infected before we do that? What's his name?
Yeah,
fill in your questions. Fill in your
uh,
questions.
it's called
What's it called?
Lurker.
Lurker.
Lurker. Lurke.
So
Or
we showed this off briefly while you guys write your questions in, and it's one of the infected that Michael has been prototyping and kind of setting up as like another standard infected type. Yeah, he has guns. It's just here. I'll just put him in the map before someone quotes me as like he's gonna have guns. So it's just a test map, but basically like essentially. This is one of the standard infected that Michael's been working on that would show up later in the days. Maybe around day 3 or 4, the special variant that moves a little bit quicker. And essentially like add a little bit more mutilators of like things that you could come up and basically like give you a little more challenge in the late game, early game. So he's kind of been working on just kind of ironing out, coming up with some more difficulties and sub variations of infected. Similar to State of Decay or Dying Light would be another good example where it's like we don't want just one standard infected type and then that's it. There's no diamondism. There's no unpredictability. Everything is just like you go onto the city. If it's not a blow up guy or a juggernaut or a spitter or whatever, it's just like no nuance there. So some will move faster, some will move slower, some will have like special hands for like weapons or whatever. And like those are just things that he's kind of brainstorming through and working through. He has to give more diversity to the game and just interject some more life of like, oh my god, it's like a group, of the lurkers, And I think he was also talking about having it where they only come out at night. What you saying?
Yes, coming out.
So like they're fast, they come out at night, a little bit higher health pool, only come out in later parts of the day. Those kind of things, basically, to make it to where like certain days of the night of the day would dictate different scenarios that could unfold. I think it's Dying Light with the night mechanic, right, Michael? With those monsters hunt you. Yeah. So I think that's where you got the inspiration from this, didn't you?
Right.
Yeah. So like that's just something he's playing with. So we'll R&D it. You'll see this guy. He'll secretly come in sometime next week. So between Monday and Wednesday, me and Michael will get together and throw him into the build. And basically just kind of give him a mutilator where he just shows up at night. Sometimes he shows up at day. And he'll just basically be another variant that will try and eat your face off. So questions. So I've stalled for long enough. Let's see what we have. So someone asked on YouTube how big the team is. It's 5 people. So you figure, it's 5 devs, 2 programmers, including myself. one modeler, animator, character modeler, weapon animator, weapon modeler, whatever, Michael. And then Dimitri and Efren do character, sorry, do vehicles, level, and level design, just modeling and texturing and all that. So they do the worlds. Excuse me. And then questions. Let's see what else we have here. I read the chat, Jesse. I'm just trying to get to my report so I can get to the Q&A and ask your questions. So, Jesse, if you have a question, do drop it in, and I will get to that. So,
There is one question
yeah.
on Discord. Literally 1984 weapon balance question. I have asked this 3+ months ago, maybe longer. Haven't heard a lot. The shield rework. What's it going to look like? So the shields are on the list. It's kind of one of those things that we'll probably get to after. I would say
Doctrines.
I couldn't really give a timeline. I would definitely say it's like, yeah, like doctrines maybe like next
It's
month
30 to
sometime.
60 days at this point.
But
Keep going,
in my
sorry.
mind, yeah, like the shield rework, in my mind, I feel like we kind of need to dabble into a cover system with the people are asking about, oh, crouching, blah, 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 all this other stuff. I feel like we'll kind of have to dabble into like how we want to kind of craft a cover system to where units are fully exposed versus like half exposed, kind of like how Company of Heroes has that cover system of where you could tell if somebody was going to take more damage versus half the amount of damage. I kind of think we have to figure that out with the shields kind of generating aggro to kind of make the infected target them to get past. It's there's a lot of things that kind of have to go into how a shield works in terms of how AI perceive them. But definitely, I would say we're going to look into making them more of like a wall in a sense of where they
Like a
have to destroy the
sponge.
wall to get behind what's.
Yeah, because the biggest
Yeah.
thing for the shields is that they worked decently in Legacy, but the formations did not have a good enough understanding of them, so they weren't dynamically shifting to like what actually mattered. So that's something where it's like I didn't want to just retroactively just throw in the shield guys, and then people were like, well, you didn't fix it, you didn't improve it. It's just so shit. So you figure I want like right now the rollout, the plan is that week, less than a week at most of change of getting in the bug fixes, the custom, the radio, and then at that point it's the Ajax. I want to get that Ajax in. I want to get it sexy. I want everyone happy with the pathfinding and the driving like they are for the helicopters. There's like one or two quirks with the helicopters, but we're working on that as well right now. And then get the rest of the vehicles in, all of them. And then doctrines. Then civilian evacuation, then dynamic civilian groups. And I'm aiming for that by the end of the year, by Christmas. That's what we're aiming for. Worst case, dynamic civilian groups bleed over into New Year's. That's not the end of the world. Because dynamic civilian groups need at least a month. To just get them to the point where I'm happy with them and you guys are happy with them, and they're just not a nuance. There's a little. Sorry, there's not just an annoyance. There's a nuance to them. There's a depth to them. They're not just superficial. Because they're superficial right now. They're just more of a way of slowing down Chelsea. That's it. So it's one of those things where like I don't want to make the same mistakes of rushing ahead, putting in all of this shit, and then like you figure it just doesn't coalesce. It doesn't go together well. So layered rollout and intentionality in the design. So like you figure, give us time to cook, and basically we will hit upon the riot shields in the doctrines when we do the infantry section of the doctrines. If you want to see a list of what is included in the doctrines, that is written at the end of the 2024 report that we write every year in December. We write a post-mortem for the game in terms of basically explaining what went right, what went wrong every single year, and what we're going to work to improve upon going into the next year as a way of transparency. So if you go and you take a gander at that, you'll be able to see the planned doctrine changes and what's coming down the pipe and the airstrikes and all the other stuff. Because right now the airstrikes are missing, and that will come in after the vehicle. Because right now I feel like just adding in the ground vehicles are gonna go do so much for gameplay. Like we added in, I didn't like just playing the game with people. And once we added in the Black Hawk and the Sparrow and the Apache and their weapons, the game just took on a new life. It was just phenomenal watching like Ford and all the other guys doing like their helicopter runs, or we're on the ground, whether we're playing operator, whether we're playing RTS, just playing the game, not having to worry about that aspect of gameplay, just worrying about our 10 or 12 units and keeping them alive while other people are in charge of the air, kind of deal. So yeah, it's just one of those things where like we're gonna get there. So questions. Let me jump to people that have their voices want to come up and speak. So Phoenix, why don't you go, and then we're gonna jump to YouTube. Hit me
All right,
with
I got
it.
two questions.
Oh,
First one, can there be a way for Chelsea to kind of mutate as you kind of go on
So
through the days?
there are like two other stages that are for Chelsea in terms of basically like her changing her model and changing like
Hey,
she's inspired off of Kerrigan by all intents and purposes. So we do have some concept for that, but for the time being, like I need to get to Chelsea's AI. Maybe like I need to fit that in next week because the bugs and everything else have kicked my ass. But I need to make some tweaks to her AI. And the thing is that the how she's going to act is reminiscent of some of her other stages. But we're just putting them in there on her base mesh, so she's dangerous and she's actually a force to be reckoned with, like the Juggernaut is. But when he doesn't malfunction, so you figure like that's the biggest thing there. Just from a visual change, that won't happen until later on when we like actually get more time to polish up her visuals more. And what was your second question?
that's good. It's kind of along the lines. Can Chelsea also kind of get stronger? Like
We're
maybe
working
have
on that right
buffs
now.
that she can
Like
do for
literally, the short
a
list that I have, and I was brainstorming this with some people on Discord, and just kind of coming up with my own internal list, talking to Michael and other cats on our team, is we were gonna do like an AOE, like claws kind of thing. We were looking at basically her throwing spikes at helicopters to down them instead of jumping on them. Her super speed, her ability to run, so running, jumping, her melee, that kind of stuff, just to kind of get her rolling, and then we'll just kind of tweak and adjust as we go. Because running into Chelsea in the early parts of the game should be devastating. It shouldn't be like, haha, it's Chelsea, it's funny. But yeah, so that is something we're working on. Did you have any other follow ups for that? Or are you good?
one
Yeah.
one last one. This one is kind of similar to what I was talking about as far as the basically, can you kind of create like a lieutenant for like an infected and have them come in at random people's games? Kind of
A
like a
randomly
lieutenant instead
generated
of
one, or the
lieutenant kind of
preset
coming in.
ones we had from Legacy?
Pre Kind of like a it's not neither. I'm like you know how you can customize your
Yes.
operator and have them come in. Basically have like a separate um thing from that. Basically the same way, but just have it like one of the
Chelsea's
lieutenants
lieutenants
for
are
like the
her
lieutenants to
operators.
spawn in.
It's just that you figure right now she only has a pool of those three, which is Nowhere Wells, the Fenrir operative, and then Mason. So you figure that's not something that's really not going to see an expansion until I can dedicate more time. I don't like realistically, her lieutenants are off the table right now until we get gun combat better in dynamic civilian groups as one of the last line items for the rebuild, which would be when I want to put in her lieutenants again, because you figure the gun combat and legacy left a lot to be desired. Of like things just died too quickly or too slowly, and it was just not very fun. And it was just something that was just kind of put in there, and then there just wasn't enough time to bake was put in there. So realistically, I'm going off of the idea right now that Chelsea has her, I guess you could say, her roamers, which are the Juggernaut and Leviathan when he gets put in the next 60 days. And the idea is that you figure those are enough right now to challenge the players, and then we'll get back to the lieutenants and their sub variations and all the other stuff, and like a little bit more later down the line. Um, so yeah, okay, and then we're gonna do YouTube. So Leo Lunatic asked, are the infected going to have buildings for building growth, different special infected, like for example, a layer for the hounds? So that is an excellent question, and I will actually show you what we have. So we actually have a biomass system that has, again, this comes down to resources at this point, where essentially we were prototyping in earlier versions of the Unreal Engine a series of prototype inspired growth, similar to the Kerrigan Zerg creep, where we would basically spawn these additively around the map dynamically, like grass growing via PCG. PCG is procedural content generation, where essentially we give it rules in terms of how it grows, and a level designer does not actually hand place them. It's all dynamically generated by the game at runtime. So it's one of those things where like we have all of these assets to basically like put on buildings, to put on the floor, and to basically just kind of make the area look infected. So like if I just rotate this and then just rotate it down. Actually, that's for a building only. But we do have versions that are only for the floor. And the idea is that you just kind of plaster that on different buildings like those over there. We are waiting until things calm down for the rebuild. So, because that's going to take me, Derek, Dimitri, there's nothing else going on. We need to figure out the underlying tech. Because you figure what we want to do is this. If I go to YouTube and I go to the PCG tool and I go to Unreal Engine. Do they have that car tutorial still? Damn it. I forget what they called it. There it is. So the idea is that this environment is generated dynamically. So no one actually goes in there and places it. You build the rules of how it places, how it grows, or how like you do it, and then you have like systems that basically like adjust it in real time. And it's highly performant for generating forests and other areas like that. So this is something that we wanted to basically learn and implement into the game, and then basically use PCG to essentially be able to generate the infection growth dynamically. So then that way, as you took a zone, it would spread and fester differently every time you played. But the biggest thing is keeping it performant. We prototyped and we did it the old-fashioned way by hand in Legacy, and it was just too many assets uniquely to make it look good across the map. It was just too expensive. So it's one of those things where like we need to basically just kind of get to that point in the foreseeable future of like after the rebuild, going into 1.4 is put that in there or put it in 1.5, where it's one of those things where like we can kind of use these assets, use PCG, set up the rules and the rules and the operations of how they handle, and then be able to be like, oh, well, you know, if there's a building and we do a trace and, you know, let's say we want to have like the infection growth run up a side of a building. And like, let's say if I put this over here and then I like, you know, I could have the PCG tool basically just put this infection growth dynamically like right over here. And you don't have to destroy every single one. It's just there for ambiance of like it dynamically just does that. And then when you destroy a pod here or destroy a pod over there, it would naturally recede from the epicenter of like where the area of influence is. Because then you could take the pod, do some basic math, and then say the PCG needs to grow from that pod. So that way you get pockets of areas where there's no infection, but you get pockets where there are. So then that way you take all these assets and you maybe break them up into subcomponents. Let's say a pod goes here, then it'd be a circle. And then it would grow out from the PCG tool in every direction. But that's something that's speculative. That's something that we need to research. I got to get with Dimitri. And then we have to basically get with Derek and then brainstorm it and prototype it and get a proof of concept working. Because right now it's just an idea. It's speculative. And we have the assets made. But we already have enough going on. But it's a brilliant idea that you have there. And it's something that we got the backlog of the stuff done. And it's just we need to work our way up to it. It's something that's very important to me to establish that prototype vibe or that look of the game. Like State of Decay even has it too for some areas. So people, let's see who has their hand raised. I think Ice Money has her hand raised, but then he ran away. So when he comes back,
no, pick him up.
Ice Money, you have the floor.
Oh, geez. Thanks. I had already asked the question in text chat anyways. Helicopters are really strong right now. We're gonna see more balance around the helicopters, like more counters from the infected, like jumping on them or just different things to counter them. Because yesterday, I think it was me and Phoenix or Rift, I think it was. We got 2 Apaches and a little bird, and we were able to end the game within like
You
10
rushed
minutes.
Chelsea, didn't you?
Yeah.
Did she ever build any spitters to counteract you?
There were some spitters, but it wasn't enough to damage what we had. Like our damage output
Was it
a lot
solely
higher
the
than what
Apache
we were
doing all the work?
getting from her. No, the Apache. It was Apache, the Blackhawk, 2 Apaches and a Blackhawk, and I think 1 little bird. Yeah. In tandem, they just were able to kill whatever was coming out the pods and kill her.
They were
She
out.
was
Were they
standing on top of
outraging the
pod, and
spitters?
she was standing next to the pod. We flew them literally right on top of her. She didn't jump.
Yeah, that's
in,
not
we
in
all
yet
jumped
for her.
in.
She's kind of stupid when it comes to helicopters. I gotta get into.
I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing, kind of what we talked about with Chelsea early on, is giving her the ability to shoot
Yeah,
spikes or some type of thing at them that does mass damage, like more than like a spine turret. Like basically take that and give it a steroid shot of where mass spike that damn near one shots your helicopter. Like I
well,
feel
she's
like
an in-game boss. She's tier 3, so like you figured she should be able to go mano to mano with the Apache. And if you don't have good control, it's dead. So
yeah, that'd be cool.
like granted, like there are like some of the things with like how we have her pod system, quote unquote, where she kind of like regenerates and comes back even stronger. I feel like once things get more fleshed out in terms of like her AI, kind of like what Robert was mentioning, is like there's a lot of things we've been brainstorming to kind of make her a lot more deadlier to encounter as soon as you go off riff. Like, you know, like beginning of the game, like bomb rushing her, like Surg rushing, basically. Like, don't get me wrong, if you play your cards right, like chess, sure, you could beat her, but it shouldn't be like I built 2 Apaches and a
I think you just win.
Sharon and she didn't stand a chance. Yeah, you know, it shouldn't be like that.
It definitely felt like a win button the second we got more than 1 Apache.
I can see where that's coming from, and it just one.
It just felt like
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where that comes down to see it's a knee jerk reaction because you figure if we buff the spitter or we make their response too strong, then it's going to be overwhelming in terms of basically like Sparrows in the early game. What day were you on?
3
So
or
it might
4 maybe.
so it might
was
come
really
down
early. It was
to
quick. 3. Yeah,
I need
Phoenix
to,
is day
I
3.
need to increase the weight of the Apache so they have a more aggressive response to it in the Black Hawk. So then that way they are more anxious about getting you out of their airspace when you are in there because they were launching investigations, but they weren't able to launch enough spitters to get you to come out. Until the birds are added, they're not going to have enough of a counter to get you to calm down properly. Because the idea is the birds are the direct anti-air counter, but they're meant to basically just mash you and take your helicopters down. They just build like 500 birds. And they just send them in a huge cluster and they just AoE you to death. So that just kind of underscores how badly that we're going to have to like peel off around the time right after we get like the other ground vehicles in and everything else in. We're definitely going to have to look into sneaking in the birds before we work on doctrine and stuff like that. Because once we get in the ground vehicles, Chelsea's going to be mega fucked. So we'll have to get them in there, and then before we work on the doctrines, technically, we're going to probably have to like get the Leviathan and the birds in, make some tweaks to the AI to make sure that it's not too easy, because it's definitely just one of those things where it's like the escalation there's a power imbalance basically. So yeah, fuck. It's going to be a fun 30 days is all I'm going to say. There's going to be a lot of movement.
Yeah, seems like it.
But Michael will notate that down, and we're going to look into that today when we do the playtest for this stream. Is that we're going to just see how the helicopters feel, because the Apache just might be too broken, or same thing with the Blackhawks. Because I know if you have good positioning and good, like, you have the weapons, the positioning, you can just wreck them. So we'll see how that goes and adjust accordingly going into the week. So let's see what else we have for questions. So YouTube, let's see what we got there. Okay, Marcy just reinforced that. So Marcy, the biggest cost for our game is really just the CPU. Your GPU really doesn't do that much unless you have like a older like 1060 like minimum spec, because you figure the biggest issue is that because it has that simulation aspect of trying to keep track of and know what's going on in the world, your CPU has to basically like calculate this guy's movement, his animations, his AI, where's like his pathfinding, and that's what makes the game the most expensive. It's just this guy moving across the street like that. Well, obviously not like that, but you get the point. Is what really makes our kind of, just games in general where there's a big open world and a lot of moving parts. It's the movement component, it's the pathfinding, and it's the AI. So the rebuild does have some enhancements over legacy, and we'll continue to tweak that and refine it as we go, as we get data, as we profile it, and whatnot. So again, if you have played the rebuild and you're running into concerns in terms of performance, I would recommend that you sort of thread on Steam, sort of thread on Discord, tag me, and post your specs. The normal A, B, and C's. Let me know what's happening. A video is great. Then I can look into it and figure out what's going on. But I have no problem sitting down, just kind of debugging that with you, figuring out like where can we improve things per se. Okay, so next question. So to clarify for Neo's question, eventually we will get to the point of having dynamic pods like this, or rather growth around it, but that's a long-term thing in terms of basically finding the time to be able to prototype it. So that's at this point, this kind of stuff is 2026. We're figuring out this kind of infection growth. It's on our agenda. It's just something we need to find a time to do R&D after we get the major line items done. I have a question. Can the player make the aircraft carrier into a makeshift HQ? So as it stands right now, and this will be coming when we do doctrines, is that the aircraft carrier is static. In Legacy, it does move. You can build units. And X, Y, and Z, that will return going into the end of the year. We will aim to basically get the aircraft carrier so it can move again. Operate the elevators, get the LCAC back in. Again, we're going to be focusing exclusively on the vehicles after this next week of bug fixes and tweaks, so we can get everything back to the way it was, get it supporting for multiplayer, and then, move on to doctrines. So that pretty much wraps up your question. Next question on YouTube. Okay, let me go up. Yeah, so Neo Taco says the same thing, is that they need to get better with the Congo lines, because you figure that does make it a little bit too easy to kill them. That is something we're working on. That is the squad system that I showed earlier in the stream for people that are coming in later, which you can rewind the stream and post, is that it's getting better. There are some issues that we're working out, and the squad system is our answer for being able to share information and keep them together as massive globs of people. But, work together as a team and move in circles, squares, X, Y, and Z, some kind of shape to attack your bases. Right. Let's see. So having artillery, like for the infected, or some kind of launcher. Let me get back to you on that one. Let's see. I gotta brainstorm that one. Let's see what else. Any other questions before we wrap up the Q&A and move on to doing the playtest? Anything on YouTube? Let me open up. Let me check Twitch. If you have any questions on Twitch, please drop them in. I'm watching all of them. No, Phoenix. I will not keep the podcast running for another hour, sir. Troll questions. Okay. I meant more. Separate buildings, nests that spawn special effects. Oh, okay. That's what you're talking about. Not for the time being, but it is something that we're talking about internally. I don't have an answer on that just yet. Being able to have more infection building types. Right now, it's purely just the gas tower, the infection pods, the burn nest, and then the defense pods themselves. We'll look into that. I would say post 1.4, but that is something that I want to do long term in terms of resources later on, because it does feel a little bit too congested, and we need to go in the route of having strategic resources for Chelsea. So then that way you have a structure, you have to hit the stopper for building juggernauts, leviathans, X, Y, and Z. It just more so it just comes down to resources. And right now, all of our resources are going into just getting the rebuild done. So when everything's get hot up, things calm down, then I can look into things like that long term. But yeah, I do agree with you on that. Let's see. Okay, so if there's not another question in the next couple of minutes, we're gonna wrap it up. I need to work on getting this build out for you guys. So the playtest will be roughly another 10 to 15 minutes because I need to cook a build and put it live on public and put it live on DevOps and the supporter one, the Patreon Discord one, whatever. If you want to partake, please join Discord so that way we can communicate and talk. If you don't have a mic, so you can at least hear us during Discord, and then you're welcome to talk in the in-game chat, just so that's easy lines of communication there. And we'll be playing for another hour or two. And then at that point, we'll wrap it up, document everything that transpired, and then we'll roll into Monday strong. So I see one more question, so I'm going to take that question. If there's not anything on YouTube by the time I wrap it up, will squad commands receive an expansion in the near future? For example, the command to tell your squad to enter a vehicle while maintaining third person to remove the need for additional player assistance or changing modes to complete the task. So yes, that is something that I do want to do. I want to keep expanding the operator in lockstep with the RTS, where they don't feel like they have to yell at an RTS player to get their attention. My short list is things like opening and locking gates, being able to issue units to enter and leave a vehicle, being able to call out airstrikes via an ability when we add in the airstrikes for the RTS, like a radio laser designator. What else was there? Being able to build without requiring an RTS player, because as it stands right now, an operator can build only if an RTS player places the hologram down or the blueprint. Then an operator can go in and build in third person and finish it or repair it. But it's more so like that's a nice assistant tool, but they need to be able to kind of build their own bases and add to the overall war effort. So those are all systems and things that we're looking at just to kind of maintain and expand upon the versatility and the usefulness of the operators when it comes to their combat. We do want to do some more sit downs with people that are in Europe, people that are playing with higher pings for the operators, so we can make them a little bit more forgiving in terms of latency. It's something that we need to find the time to research and evaluate. For having client-side prediction for aiming, for shooting, and certain actions, so they seem more responsive locally, and you don't always have to wait for the server to respond. So it's something also we need to look into and just kind of research going into the next, like, to December. Because I noticed that when you're playing with someone that's a host, you're playing as the operator in third person, there's quite a bit of latency in terms of some of the actions, some delays that we need to iron out to make the experience overall more enjoyable. So we're conscious of those, and we're looking into those things. Like we did, the operators can now ride vehicles. The operators can shoot on the skids of the little birds. But give me another example of having the ability for the operators to switch seats in a vehicle. That kind of stuff. Now, long term, after the doctrines and after the base vehicles are in, we do want to look into the ability to have the operators drive vehicles and be able to maintain and manage the turrets, shoot them. So before we start civilian evacuation and dynamic civilian groups, we're definitely going to carve out about a week or two to take all of the backlog of assets of the airstrikes, the vehicles, and just everything else, and just see what needs to be done to bring those systems up to, to the level. So then that way, again, it's a unified war effort. In terms of basically like the operators can contribute to every aspect of gameplay, whether it be the RTS or whether it be playing in TPS. So, Craig had his hand up. I keep inviting him to speak, but he never joins the room. Does anyone else have a question? I think Hawkins had something. Oh, well, squads receiving a. Squads commands receive an expansion, for example. Oh yeah, I already answered that question. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up the Q&A. I need to work on getting that build out so we can do a play test for the next 10 to 15 minutes. Thank you guys so much for coming. We appreciate you guys jumping in. And basically,
wait. Check my Discord channel. Ignore if you want to proceed.
Something. I don't know. The text on the arm is too on the nose, don't you think? Just give it an emblem.
Okay.
Just do an emblem. It's too on the nose. So we'll show it as a mock-up. But basically, Michaels are working on other ways to give the Patreons their little like incentives of like, X, Y, and Z. And he's been prototyping some other like outfits and skins to basically give them as well. For like because we have a Patreon, we have a Discord pledge system, and it all helps out for basically just kind of being able to like, pay the bills. We work day jobs. So that was something that Michael was prototyping to give to anyone that pledges on Discord or YouTube or like Discord. Slow moment to basically if we pledge over a certain amount of like $3 or whatever, you'll just get that skin for free. So that's something that Michael's been working on the back end just to kind of like help out and just kind of give our Patreons a small little thing here and there. And again, there will be other operators that are coming for everyone. We figure like it's a juggling act of weapons, level design, programming, and everything else. So he's just kind of prototyping and just kind of seeing what he can kind of iron out there. We'll have more to show next week, but that's just a little tease and whatnot. So from there, thank you guys so much for coming. And we're going to segue into the playtests again. So if you want to support development, consider checking out our Patreon, consider checking out our merch store, buy one of the support packs on Steam. Everything helps. We appreciate the support. We appreciate the patience. And we will see you next week.